Imagine a sound so intense it turns the sky into liquid fire. For over a century, the world has stared at this face and assumed they were looking at a screaming man. But they were wrong. This is the true story of Edvard Munch and the Scream. A story about a house full of ghosts, a mountain that screamed until the air turned to blood, and the most dangerous man in history trying to burn it all to the ground. But before you and I face the Nazis, look at that man. Do you see his hands? Most people think he's screaming, but he's actually hearing the scream and desperately trying to make it stop. But if he's not screaming, who is? To find the source of that scream, we have to travel 11,000 kilometers to a tiny island in Indonesia that was about to be wiped out. In 1883, a volcano didn't just erupt. It screamed for 5 months straight and triggered a 30-meter wall of water that swallowed 36,000 people. The blast was so violent, it made every human within 40 miles deaf. And then it circled the entire globe 7 times. Look at the sky behind him. Those aren't just artistic colors. They are tongues of fire made of sulfur and ash that stayed in the atmosphere for years, turning every sunset into a pretty bloodbath. The noise of the explosion was even recorded in Norway, but here's the strange part. The human ear couldn't actually hear it. But that day it brought out something in Munch, something that has pained him since he was a child. You see, macabre visions and nightmares have haunted Edward since he was a little boy. But why do you think the son of a doctor felt like death was always lurking in the dark? When Edward was 5, his mom painfully died of tuberculosis, leaving Edward in the hands of a man who probably shouldn't have been raising children. A man so obsessively religious that he saw demons, and he made sure his children saw them too. To keep little Edward and his siblings entertained, Edward's father had a very morbid definition of quality family time. So kids, who wants to hear some really visceral, terrifying ghost stories? No? Too scary? Okay, we'll keep it light this time. I'll just read you some gothic horror stories instead. His favorite sister was next, taken by the same sickness that killed his mother. Then his younger sister Laura drifted into madness. But hey, for a moment, there was a flicker of hope. His brother Andreas broke the family curse. He found love, got married, and even had a little baby on the way. 3 months after the wedding, Andreas was dead. Years later, on that quiet bridge in Norway, that family trauma finally found its voice and screamed. In the scream, Munch didn't just paint a volcanic sunset. He painted the pain of his family. But when he finally showed the world the demons in his head, the reaction wasn't disappointment, it was physical shock. Back then, even Monet's blurry landscapes were considered scandalous. Now imagine people being offended by this, and then standing in front of human insanity. People didn't ask if it was art, they asked, "Are you okay?" The outrage was so intense that a medical student publicly diagnosed him, claiming the painting was clinical evidence of a disturbed mind. Some artists would have sued or cried, but Munch? He scribbled a tiny secret on the painting. Can only have been painted by a madman. How insane Munch truly was, his neighbors probably realized when they saw him carrying his masterpieces into the woods at night. The painting is only finished when it has suffered. If you showed up at Edward's front door without an invitation, you weren't greeted with a, "Oh, nice to see you." You were greeted with the cold steel of a rifle aimed at your face. But by 1908, the party was over. Edvard Munch was faced with a terrifying choice: remain a genius and die in a madhouse, or get cured and risk becoming a boring nobody. As you can imagine, his brain was cooked from decades of absinthe and paranoia. He had no choice but to surrender to a clinic, where the doctors strapped him to a chair to reboot his shattered nervous system with electricity. He waited for darkness to take him, but something even more shocking happened. The treatment worked. The blood-red skies turned into soft, yellow suns. For the first time in his life, Edvard was happy. But to his fans, this was a disaster. They didn't want a happy monk, they wanted nightmares and insanity. He had traded his demons for a quiet life with his dogs. He thought the war was over, but while he was finding peace, a failed artist in Germany was about to take Munch's old paranoia and turn it into reality. Adolf Hitler declared war on modern art, putting Picasso, Klee, Matisse, and Munch on a hit list of biological disasters. But inside Hitler's inner circle, his right-hand men were committing artistic treason right under his nose. While Nazi soldiers were ripping Munch's paintings off museum walls, Hitler's top leaders were quietly making phone calls. Publicly, they cheered Hitler on when he called Munch's art a product of a sick brain. But privately, those same men were hunting for his paintings like addicts, desperate to own the filth they were supposed to destroy. The two biggest hypocrites? Joseph Goebbels and Hermann Göring. Goebbels was such a fanboy that he tried to rebrand Munch as a Nordic hero just to save the art for his own office. Meanwhile, Göring was less subtle. He simply stole the masterpieces and hid them in his private villa. Munch survived the Nazis, the family curse, and bloody bar fights, but the universe saved the hardest punch for last. In the winter of 1943, the sky over Oslo suddenly turned into a wall of fire. A Nazi ammunition depot had just exploded, damaging 400 buildings and killing 115 people in an instant. For a moment, the world was certain. The great Edvard Munch was dead. But while his neighbors were screaming and running for cover, he didn't even flinch when his windows shattered into 1,000 pieces. Instead, he grabbed his brushes and ran toward the light. He stood there in the freezing open air for hours, mesmerized by the beautiful violence of the blast. As the fires roared around him, he tried to trap that explosion on canvas. He survived the blast. He even survived the falling debris, but he couldn't survive the night air. The cold, wet Norwegian night seeped into his lungs while he painted, triggering a simple case of pneumonia that would end his life just 3 weeks later. Edvard had finally found peace. The madness was over. Or was it? Edvard Munch's life reads like a gothic horror story. How do you survive 80 years when your own mind is a battlefield? He wasn't just sad or eccentric. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and depression. He fought alcoholism and borderline personality disorder. Any of these is a life sentence. Munch battled them all at once. The universe can be cruel, but Edvard was tougher. He took the worst the world could throw at a human being and turned it into a new language. Edvard Munch didn't just survive the darkness, he became the founding father of Expressionism. But the biggest tragedy of it all is that he gave his life to art, only for us to turn his soul-crushing scream into a group chat emoji.
Alright, that's it. So I think I've talked enough. I would love to hear from you now. Just leave me a comment which Munch artwork you enjoyed the most. Leave a like, subscribe, and let's do this again sometime soon. Until then,